Let's get into it. Soul Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. Now, Joe Rogan has noticed something that Alan Watts predicted decades ago. I mean, this is a very, very wild Alan Watts clip and a very interesting Joe Rogan clip. Now, Joe Rogan's talking about telepathy, but he's not talking about it with someone who is, wrapped in tinfoil like myself. He's talking about it with an actual doctor that's doing actual studies that's actually proving that telepathy exists. But then Alan Watts so masterfully breaks down everything that we are currently seeing today. I mean, he goes over cell phones, he goes over FaceTime, he even predicts Neuralink. But what he does is what we haven't done yet, which is realizing that everything that we're trying to make artificially is already within us. It's a very, very interesting clip. You have to catch it. It's at the end. Let's start the episode. Let's get into it.
This is happening enough and enough that I believe that. And then the language was the next thing, and that was pretty remarkable. And I'm not saying every non-speaker has these gifts. I'm just saying the people that I've met that have been a part of this project, and there's an awful lot, do. And I think probably the gifts change per person too, right?
How often do you see the language thing?
I should send out another questionnaire, but probably every 5 individuals.
Wow.
But that's a rough number, but it would be interesting to survey.
Are there any other data points that would indicate that someone would be more likely to have these language skills? Is there any factors about these individuals, like the differences in their conditions or the environment?
Well, this is one thing that has been really remarkable, I think, especially since the telepathy tapes came out, is how much belief and just acceptance of these type of things matters for them to show themselves, right? So I was talking to a parent the other day who's not in the telepathy tapes of someone I've met through this, and she said, look, my son, after the telepathy tapes came out, he's about 19, said, I need to come out to you. I can also read your mind. But just never felt comfortable saying it because didn't think his parents would respond well, right?
Oh.
And another teacher was telling me, look, now that this has come out and I've realized this to be a truth, in her clinic or classroom, she will do 10 minutes for thought sharing in the beginning of the day where they can all talk telepathy and hang out. And she said it's one of the only times when they're all quiet and they're just thought sharing. And she said that, now that the telepathy is out, more and more parents are being told this and, accepting it. Because when I fell into this world, before the telepathy tapes was out in the world, almost every single parent or teacher I met was thinking this was an individual miracle happening alone in their house. They couldn't tell anyone. Even sometimes the spouses were fighting. I met one parent once, not in the telepathy tapes, but I met her in the journey, and she said, my husband wants to take my child away because he thinks I've lost my mind by saying that this is happening.
Oh, Jesus.
So, so now that it's out there, I think it's just think about it. If you have kids, right? If you believe in your kids, I believe you, I believe in you, it makes a difference. The placebo effect.
Sure.
We know placebo effect works. If you believe in something, it makes a difference. So when you say to a non-speaking individual, I want to know all of you, I'm excited to know all of you, even if that means that nothing you can tell me is going to scare me or make you love you less, or, I think that's a cool way to approach anyone, really.
Yeah, certainly. And I think skepticism and cynicism is probably also contagious.
Mm-hmm.
You probably feel that negative, doubting energy,
yes,
which is very suppressing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're already nonverbal and you're already dealing with a lot of other stuff, that negativity on top of it, you'd probably not want to even try.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a shame. I think.
Just negative feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think this is something that you have?
I think we all have it. I mean,
but have you tried to encourage it in yourself, or have you tried to explore it?
Well,
because I would imagine,
yeah,
if I was doing this work, I'd be like, let me see if I can do this.
yeah, and I, for sure, and I will. I often pray at night, and sometimes I'll also just beam out thoughts to some of the non-speakers in my life and hope they catch them, and, they're loving thoughts usually, of course. And then there's been a few times where I'll see a non-speaker that maybe, I've come to know and love in a dream, and they're communicating something to me, and I'll write the parent in the morning and say, can you ask so-and-so if they were trying to communicate XYZ at all? Or were they trying to communicate with me last night, is usually what I'll say. And they'll say, oh, yeah, they wanted you to know blank, 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 blank. And it'll be what happened. So, but that's only happened in dreams, not in real life. Dreams are real life, but yeah. So I think this.
Do you know how crazy that sounds? That's like a real thing. That's a real conversation. There's people out in the world having that conversation. Oh, was someone trying to communicate? I have a lot of students. Was someone trying to communicate with me last night? Was your son? Oh, yeah. He was actually trying to let you know he didn't get the homework done. He just wanted to let you know peace and love and all that stuff. Did you get that? I did, actually. I did. In my dreams. Oh, he does that. I'll tell him not to do that anymore. What? That's a real conversation people are having? We are children of Rogan? Yeah, seriously.
I think the more people are open to this and practicing it, it's there. You'll get there. And a lot of teachers are able to get it back, two-way telepathy, where they can start hearing their students back. Ooh. And they said, there's a teacher, and I love this story because I heard her on a podcast actually, and it was sent to me. I was like 2 years into my journey, and this teacher thought no one else in the world was going through this. And she said, there's a student and he's telepathic and he can read my thoughts. And then all of a sudden I started being able to hear him back, and I'd be cooking dinner and I'd hear him, and he would tell me things. He'd just pop into my mind, and he was younger. So she had to set parameters to be like, you can't come into my mind all the time. But she said that in the classroom then they started being able to teach, just to do the whole thing, the whole lesson without talking. She'd ask him something in his head. He'd start typing it. She'd ask something else in his head. He'd start typing it. And that was something that like a lot of teachers have expressed that, or speech pathologists. And I've often wondered, why is it easier for the educator, instead of the parent? And I think it's because parents put so much stuff on our kids, right? Like if I'm watching my son play basketball and he's not boxing out and he's not doing this, I'm like, oh God, can't even watch, But if it's someone else's kids, I'm like, oh, they're 5, they're just learning,
Right.
I have no care if anyone else's kid is doing this. But so I think with our kids, we put all this baggage on them, even if we're not intending it. Like the energy is so great, where if it's just free and you're just wide open and you're just ready, I think some cool bond can often happen between anyone, but certainly, at least what my experience has been, more educators than parents, that it goes into this two-way thing.
This teacher, did they explain what the sensation was like hearing the words in their head? Like how did they receive these things?
So at this point, there's a lot of teachers, so I have like a little bit more data points on this. And for her, she was hearing like a voice in her head, very clear, very clear.
Was she hearing that she interpreted as the child's voice? Was it a child's sound?
Yeah. And that's what's so cool is for some of the individuals who've kind of gone through this will say, you just know it's their voice, even though they don't have a voice in the real world. Like you just know it's their energy imprint, right? Like this is their voice. But then I've met some teachers who are like, no, it comes in as like a visual package, if you will, right? Like, or one of the most beautiful things I heard from a mom in England, and I think her story is great because she knew this was going on for years, was scared to put it out there. She finally did. I'm not getting any younger. I'm putting it out. And then, of course, there's a lot of parents around England that were like, me too. This is happening to me. And she once explained it to me in the most beautiful way. She said, if you say the word with a word, Thanksgiving, you've just said the word Thanksgiving. Right. If you send it telepathically, you receive the smells, you receive the sleeping in your childhood bed again, like your crotchety uncle who's mad about that, like the game of the sound of the football game, maybe snow, you're this person walking with a pie, like the prayer you say, whatever it is, all the things that make your experience, that comes to you. And there's no misunderstanding what this means and feels and is, and it's this whole expansive idea. So I think she receives things that way.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's so cool, but it's also because of the cultural restrictions that we have put on the idea of telepathic communication. Even while you're saying this, I'm so fascinated, and I believe it for sure. Part of me is like, shut up. You know what I mean? It's like that part of you is strong.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that part of us, unfortunately, because of all the charlatans and because of the cultural restrictions on just the concept of telepathy, I wonder how much of that holds us back. Because there's some things that you do know, and you don't know why you know them. And if you're a person who goes on instincts, you'll follow those instincts, and you go, I have no idea how I knew that was the right thing to do. But it was.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think one thing is experiencing something, you just believe it, like I said. And I think anyone who has engaged with, walks into a room with a non-speaker who can do this, which from my experience has been quite a few, it's not hard to see. It's pretty easy to witness it. And so when you experience something over and over and over again, right, it's like, are all these parents and teachers all around the world and speech pathologists and principals and ministers and rabbis and everyone who's witnessed this lying? Did they all come in this great conspiracy to decide that like we're going to trick the world? Or they're experiencing something and telling the truth? And the first one is out there. That's like the most impossible thing to imagine. The other thing I want to say too is like, there's a motivation for someone who's a charlatan, right? You want to make money off of someone or something, especially when they're the most vulnerable, you're going to exploit this and et cetera, or it's for your own ego, your gain or career or whatever. To date, because non-speakers have not been able to have the resources that they need to spell and engage in society, they've not been able to have a career yet. I mean, some have, but very few. Or make money on their own, or, be in the popular crowd or have some cool whatever. And so what's to gain? What is to gain? And it's also, it takes so much energy often to spell out something. I can't imagine that you'd spell out a lie. I mean, there's nothing to gain in this entire population talking about this in silos all over the world.
Right.
Just
and also very few people engage with nonverbal people. So for this to be this very bizarre sort of strange phenomena that's happening with these people, you would have to be in that experience with those people to even be able to appreciate what's going on.
Yeah.
I think most people, we're so accustomed to talking, we're so accustomed to typing things out and communicating the way we do normally that we don't even think about what the experience is like for both the parents and the child, and that this is a completely different way of living. So whatever these innate abilities that we may have, of course, they would be the ones who would have them. It kind of makes sense that they would be the ones that would be so tuned into us, whereas us, we're sort of probably drowning those thoughts. Even if they do exist, we're drowning them off with language, with cultural expectations, with social media, with news, and
with thoughts.
Yeah, with everything. With all this, we're bombarded. We're never even alone with our thoughts anymore.
Right.
We're just bombarded constantly 24/7. And, this is the number one criticism about social media, is that it's shaping your mind in a way that you're not even asking it to. You don't really don't have agency over it.
Right.
You're just constantly being bombarded with data. And that data, whether you like it or not, even if you're objective, it's changing the way you interface with the world. These people aren't experiencing any of that. So
I think they're probably I think they have so much input coming in, that it can be overwhelming. But it's not informing their. Yeah,
they're not engaging.
Yeah, they're not engaging. Yeah.
Man, you know what? To what Joe's saying about being bogged down with thoughts, I'm convinced that, because now I have a kid, right? The kid's young, and the kid, doesn't talk, right? Because they don't talk at first. It's weird. But it's almost like they decide to start talking because they realize that you don't have the telepathy thing anymore. And they have it because they're like, when they're babies, they have it. They're connected. I'm convinced if you could like hear their thoughts or talk to them, they can probably see things on the other side still. They can probably see past relatives and angels and all sorts of stuff because they're constantly pointing at things that aren't there in the corner of the room. They'll be like, what's that? My kid does that all the time. And it is scary sometimes because it's at night sometimes. You're sitting there and the kid points over your shoulder. And you're like, oh, God, how am I going to go to sleep now? Why'd you just do that to me? It feels that way. And now the kid's starting to talk. Kids starting to figure it out and starting to figure out how to talk, but it's only because they start to realize, oh, you're not like I'm in your mind, I'm doing the thing that we naturally do, but for some reason you're not doing it back. So I have to point at things and I have to try and talk and I have to try and sound out words because it seems like this is the only way that you know how to communicate. That's what it seems like. I would love to know what her kids are freaky like that. Yeah, it's whew. It used to happen even before. Like now the baby can point and be like, try to say the words, what's that or something like that. And that's freaky too. But when the kid was like 6 months, 5 months, and you're just holding them and they're just like looking off across, it's so scary. It's like, oh. Or you're with them and they're just like looking off in the corner and you're like, oh my God, What are you doing right now? What are you looking at? Hey, hey. And you can't even like tear them away from whatever it is that they see. Oh gosh. I'm telling you, it's it's crazy. Especially when you believe in stuff like that, cuz I believe this is a real thing. Like you just wrote remote viewing, like remote viewing is a real thing, right? And it goes hand, it's adjacent to telepathy. Yeah, over your shoulder. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's crazy. Over this shoulder. Look at that. That's what she's seeing in like the ether of the spirit world, right? But it's interesting. It's a very interesting concept to think about, telepathy and it existing. I think it does. I think if we all stayed away from the path that we're on now, that we would have something like that. I think, they talk about junk DNA. I think there is no junk DNA. I think there's just DNA that we haven't figured out, or maybe in a more tinfoil world, something that we've had deactivated. But there's no junk. There's no junk in this thing, this DNA thing. So yeah, you throw Doritos in here and all sorts of nonsense. You got Guinness right now. I'm drinking ginger beer here. We throw stuff into our bodies, but there's no junk that we were born with. And I think a lot of that quote unquote junk DNA is just stuff that we don't understand, and it's weird. Why do you think intuition makes sense? Intuition does make sense. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that intuition. I use my intuition constantly, and I actively work it like a muscle. And I think probably, and again, this is just one of those ideas that's out there, but probably telepathy could be worked that way as well. Funny story. I knew two guys. Well, I knew one guy and I knew the other guy, but this guy is telling me the story. They did a lot of this, right? They were doing a whole bunch of this. And he recalls a story. I mean, he tells this story all the time where he's like, I had a telepathic conversation with someone. He was my friend. He completely heard me, and I heard him. And apparently it was just like something was on a table and he wanted what was on the table. And they were having a conversation the same way you and I would be sitting somewhere and I'm like, man, I really want to go and grab that. And you're like, oh man, you should go and grab it. And you're like, I can't right now. I'm too hit with all this stuff and I can't get up and get it. Oh man, I'll get it for you. You want me to get it for you? Yeah. Would you do that? Yeah, sure, man. That was the exact conversation that they had. No lips moved, no talking, nothing. They just had that conversation in their minds. And both of them are like, that is what happened. That is the conversation that happened. I don't know. I think our mind is an interesting thing, and we don't play with it enough. And I don't mean play with it like throw things into it and experience things. I mean, we don't sit around and just think about things enough to really grasp it. Like, why doesn't everybody just try to have a telepathic conversation all the time? Like, why aren't we just taught? If we were just taught to do that, like that was a thing, it would probably start happening a lot more. That's why this episode's so interesting, because it makes you think, what's going to happen as this episode spans out, as this woman's research spans out into the world. Do you know about the 4-minute mile? Do you guys know about the 4-minute mile? I believe it's the 4-minute mile. The 4-minute mile was something that couldn't be done. For some reason they were like, oh, your body can't run that fast and blah, blah, blah. It was a bunch of nonsense. And then finally someone did it. And then as soon as they did it, other people were able to do it. And then people in high school were able to do it. And it's this weird thing that once a mental block has been removed by one of us, it in a way gets removed from all of us, because we start seeing that it's a fact. We go, oh no, this is real. Okay. So this is a thing that we all can do now? Okay, well then I'm going to try and do it. And then people try and do it, and some people can't do it. I can't run a 4-minute mile right now. There's no chance. maybe 5, maybe 6, maybe 7. Could not run a 4. No way. I couldn't even imagine that. But it is possible. I know it's possible, right? Whereas before, the scientists and the doctors, they were all like, no, that's not something that can be done. And everybody just kind of went with it. It's weird. It's very weird. But I'm gonna play Alan Watts. Colin, very true, very well said. And you and your child, I got chills about that because I have 3 daughters and remember that, but you phrased it very well. Yeah, the over the shoulder thing, the kids, it's so freaky. So freaky. Actually, it's really freaky. I don't even think about it cuz it freaked me out so much. I was with my kid and they looked at something. And I don't know, kids, 1.5, they have emotions and stuff, and sometimes they want their mom, and I don't know. But she was looking over the shoulder, and then all of a sudden just started crying, and I was like, oh my god. I'm like, stop. And she wouldn't stop, and it was like she saw something that scared her, and I was like, oh wow, what could she have saw? Because there's like good energy around my wife and I. But it was just so freaky. That was the freakiest time. The other times have just been silent, just pointing. That time she just cried. And I was like, oh my God. It freaked me right out, man. Freaked me right out. Technically, when you watch him, he is very childlike. I appreciate that Elon makes me not take things seriously. Elon does it. He's probably communicating with your kids right now. Yeah, Elon is probably one of those guys that has telepathy, right? He's definitely one of those nonverbal kids that became verbal, for sure. Yeah. Anyway, let's hear Alan Watts talk about this whole thing. What I might do is play like the first 3 minutes and then jump into the last 3 minutes, but just his explanation of technology and how it's the thing that brings us there, but also the thing that holds us back, just goes along with the conversation so perfectly. Listen to this.
Systems of communication are an extension into the external world of man's nervous system. Telephones, telegraph, radio, television, all this network of electronic devices is extending our nervous system in the same way as a wheel extends our feet. But consider the problems that are arising out of this. The extension of the nervous system electronically means the end of privacy. As if all your interior thoughts were to become instantly public and available to everyone. Or conversely, as if your so-called private self were to become a shared self. Let's think of it, first of all, in the worst way we can think of it. The inconvenience of everybody being able to barge in on us by telephone. Double that inconvenience, treble it, with the inconveniences you can imagine for a future technology, where you would not only have the sound of the person's voice on the telephone, but also their visual image. That would be to advertise yourself as dead. You must answer, or else a busy signal. Have you ever thought about busy signals as a method of self-defense? Because we do it all the time. When we say somebody asks you to do something you don't really want to do, you excuse yourself on the grounds of saying, well, but that day I happen to be busy. I have work to do. Even if you thoroughly enjoy your work, like for me, all my work is play. But I can say to people, I have to work, I'm sorry. And I feel slightly dishonest, and I don't know what to do about it. So then, imagine then this situation where we have the huge electronic intercommunication, so that everybody is in touch with everybody else in such a way that it reveals their inmost thoughts, and there is no longer any individuality, no privacy. Everything you are, everything you think, is revealed to everyone. So don't be frightened of the notion that there may come a day when everybody is mutually bugged with microphones and everything, so that there aren't any secrets. Now, what we're afraid of, you see, is that some power will control all of us by this method. But that power, whoever is the controlling agency, must, in the kind of 1984 Orwellian horror, be the one individual whose thoughts are not public. If the super controller has his thoughts public, then he can't be in that position. So the horror idea is, if everybody is circuited so as that his private thoughts are public knowledge to all his friends and relations and to the controller, but the controller's thoughts are not public knowledge, then you have a system which is a real dangerous kind of dictatorship. All right, now, we see our technology moving in this direction, inevitably. But insofar as it is doing this, insofar, in other words, as electronics is making everybody available to everybody else, what we're doing is that we are discovering, through technology, a state of affairs which in fact has existed all the time. Look at it this way. The first thing that human beings created on this planet to communicate with distant points were roads, trails where people walked. With the coming of horses and the mastery of horses, the roads became, as it were, more clearly stamped because of the hard hoof of the horse. But in the 19th century, we began to go beyond roads because we discovered rails, then wires. And the world became a network. The economic world became a network of roads, rails, and wires. But now the fascinating thing is we are beginning to witness a disappearance of all those three methods of communication. The railways and the roads have gone to the airplane, and the wires have gone to radio and television, which require no wires to connect. And you will see that as human beings become more technically efficient, that the scars of technology will disappear from the face of the earth. The moment that everybody has his personal hoppycopter, there will be no further need of the freeway. And the freeway will break up, and grass and moss will grow over it because nobody's traveling it. And it'll disappear back into the landscape. Hooray. What an awful thing it is. You know, the concrete octopus. And these ridiculous automobiles in which we each travel around and make a nuisance of ourselves. But they will vanish because they simply are not technologically efficient. Now you say, well, the helicopter will take its place. All right. Is that really necessary? Because as a matter of fact, if we couple the science of television with the science of laser beams, we can get a three-dimensional image of anybody we'd like to see right here in this room. In other words, you can contact your friends in New York, and you can assemble them all together in laser beam images by, as it were, dialing each one and say, can you come on, can you come on, can you come on? Then we can have a laser beam created three-dimensional image of anybody you want to talk to sitting right in this room. Now, there may be some limitations to what you can do with a laser beam image of somebody else. But to all intents and purposes, there they are sitting together. And you understand that each one of them, in their own room in New York or Boston or wherever, they have an equivalent laser beam image of you and all the others who are involved in this conference. So you're looking at a certain area in a room where there are three-dimensional images of a group of your friends. And these three-dimensional images exist in the separate apartments of every single one of those people involved in the conference.
You said, wow, yeah, wait as he keeps explaining it. He doesn't stop here, right? Now he's reaching our age where we're at right now, but he keeps going. And it sounds like Neuralink, what he's explaining. Listen to this.
So that the same conference is happening in 5 different places. Let's say there are 5 people involved. In each one of them, there's one of them there who thinks he's authentic. See? And he has these 5 laser beam images, 4, talking to you. And so it is in every other situation. And you begin to ask then, where are you? And furthermore, by means of further electronic technology, every one of these 5 people are not only visible to each other on the screen, in the cubic screen of the laser beam television, but also their inmost thoughts are clear to each other. There is no concealment. Imagine that. So this kind of mutual knowledge of each other, which we could have by some sort of technology, would be wonderful. Really, if we would accept it. Would go on from this, that just as the roads have disappeared, or will disappear, and the wires disappear, eventually the electronic gadgetry will disappear. And the electronic network that communicates from person to person will eventually become ESP, or psionic. We will get it from each other without any need for an electrical gadget, by telepathy. Because you see, what all technology is doing, it's not creating a new situation. It is discovering what has always existed. When we started to use conscious attention as our main faculty of understanding the world and communicating with each other, we became ignorant of all the other methods of communication that exist, because we specialized on one. And in order to function in this world, we had to make this one method of experiencing things, find out all the channels of communication that exist, and explain them and talk about them and measure them so that we know they're really there. But as it goes on, you see, this conscious attention creating technological devices for communication. All it is actually doing, it is discovering the routes of communication that have always been there. Now, I want to take this a step further. Do you understand this now? Let's suppose we eventually discover that we don't need radio and that we don't need television because we have ESP, and that we come through our technology to make ESP respectable so that we can admit to ourselves that there really is that thing going on. Because we couldn't admit it before because it was not scientifically acceptable that there could be anything like that. The first step is we make an electronic model of ESP. And it works, obviously, because it's electronic. But then we discover that we don't need the model. We can do it anyhow. Just like Homing pigeons have radar built into them, and white-throat birds can navigate by the stars. How much more value are you than many sparrows? You know, you have it. So we discover that. Well, when we have finally no need to travel, to telephone, to communicate by any technical method whatsoever, because we all instantly read each other's thoughts and have all information whatsoever available to us. Is that the point? Is that the great desideratum? Is that what we wanted, the thing we were trying to get? You find there's still something beyond that. Because when you can read everybody else's thoughts, what information will you get from doing that? You will find that reading somebody else just like reading you. Knowing somebody else's mind is pretty much like reading your own mind. Yeah, there are some little variations that are of interest, but basically, to know you thoroughly would be like knowing me thoroughly. So, not only have the roads vanished, the rails vanished, the wires vanished, the radio has vanished, the television has vanished, but finally the ESP vanishes as a line of communication, because we've at last discovered that we are all one.
Holy, that was incredible. Wow. I didn't listen to that last part. I didn't listen to that last part beforehand. But that's where he really ties it all in. Knowing me thoroughly is like knowing you thoroughly. That's so true. Wow. Alan Watts, man. Alan Watts. That's how you view empathy? Yeah. Yeah. In a way, yeah, that is what that is, right? Stepping into someone else's shoes, understanding their emotions in a given situation, getting what they were going through. This is like your JFK talk last week. Thanks for that, man. That was so great. Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's called, it's from a talk called Future of Communication. And he did that in the 70s. That was in 1971, I believe. He gave that lecture. It's called Future of Communication by Alan Watts. I haven't found the full thing yet because it probably goes a lot deeper. But yeah, it's so true. You know, just talking about, you know, he mentions the scars of tech leaving the earth. The scars of tech. That makes me think of like ancient Egypt, or even beyond ancient Egypt, right? We're starting to learn that the people who were there aren't quite the people who did everything, but didn't build everything. But it's like the scars just leaving. Just, you have no idea who did what. You have no idea what tech they used. You have no clue. It's all gone. But then when he started talking about the laser beam devices, he's basically talking about our phones, right? He's talking about cell phones. He's talking about FaceTime. He's talking about Instagram calling and things like that. That's what he's talking about there. I was like, wow, that is so true. Right? And then he moves on to talk about tech shows us what has always existed. And that's what Joe was talking about with telepathy, is that we have all these thoughts and we get bombarded constantly. And you know, it's constant thoughts because of the busyness of life and feeling like you have so many things to take care of. And then it becomes also the phone. The phone is now doing it as well. It's giving you a whole bunch of information. And then even beyond that, it's just, there's just constant information being thrown at you. So you don't even have time to slow down to hear your own thoughts most of the time. Like, what if you did? And what if you had time to listen to your own thoughts, but then also you could take a interest into someone else's thoughts as well. And then you're on the wavelength of of Joe and Kai Dickens there talking about telepathy. Because now you're doing that. But then when he takes it beyond that, and then you realize we're all one, that's exactly it, right? That is the signal that telepathy gives you, that there's no borders between us in actuality, you know? Makes me think of how mycelium communicates. Yeah, mycelium. Yeah, exactly. Mycelium, there's no border between mycelium. There's no border, and they all get together and help where they need to get. Everybody knows what everybody else is doing. But it's interesting because I am still in this body. I'm still this person. So the idea of someone just knowing everything about me is like, I don't want you to know everything. I don't want you to know everything. Hold on. Give me my busy signal. I want to be able to. But as he's talking about that, what he's talking about, the ESP, the electronic ESP, that's Neuralink, right? That's what that is at the end of the day. Elon keeps saying he's only going to put it into blind people and paralyzed people, but it's going to go beyond that, of course. It might go to the nonverbal people after a while that Joe Rogan's guest takes care of and works with. And then eventually it'll go to regular people because somebody will want it. They'll be like, oh, well, this guy who's paralyzed is having a great time. I want some of that and some of walking around. Let me get both. Let's do it. And then everybody will get it. I won't. And I shouldn't even say everybody. There will be a bunch of people like me who go, nah, not for us. We're good. But what's interesting about this thing that he plays out is, this is if his way plays out if there's not corporations and people involved who want to kind of stay rich, maybe establish control, etc., right? Because then you can just let the tech go away. But right now we live in a world where there are people who wouldn't let that go away. And they would convince all of the people who got it, sounds familiar, all the people who got it, they would convince all of them that they did the right thing. And those people that didn't get it, well, those people are, oh, you got to watch out for those people. They don't want you to know what they're thinking. It's because they're always scheming, you understand. And then that whole thing kicks off. Man. But then what's interesting is, if there are people who decide that they're not going with Neuralink, and let's say that technological type of thing just starts taking over, and they go deeper and deeper into that hive mind, that artificial hive mind, and then there's a bunch of people who go deeper and deeper into their divine, and they leave the technology behind. What would happen is they would have this electronic artificial telepathy, and then we would have this natural God-given telepathy. And then from there, who knows what happens, right? I didn't write that part of the movie yet. Did you? Did you write that part of the movie yet? Yeah, what a great way to wrap up. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I figured this would be like a palate cleanser. I used to listen to Alan Watts a lot. Me too. I used to listen to him daily, and it kind of just drifted away. Again, bombarded with so much information that certain things fall off that shouldn't fall away and that you should keep, actually. And for me, this is definitely one of them. Listening to him and Terrence McKenna, and I really want to get back to that in life. A lot of people don't seem to be as sensitive as I am to it. Maybe I had a few too many ESP Zooms. Also makes me think of people who have passed that are literally still with us. Mind-boggling. Yeah, I always think that too. I was talking about it with my personal trainer, and I was saying how when I met my wife, I instantly, for some reason, felt like her grandfather was around her. And I didn't even really know her, and then I learned about her grandfather passing, and she felt really close to him, and it was upsetting for her. And I was like, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, he stuck around. It just felt that way. Felt like he stuck around. I didn't even know him. Nothing about him. It was interesting. Distractions create distortion, which creates disruptions. Yes, perfectly said. Distractions create distortions, which create disruptions. 100%. That's what's going on a lot of the time. That's why I'm working on my Sundays being away from my phone completely. It's very hard to pull off because sometimes I need to post a video or I need to do this, but I got to start scheduling my stuff and getting ahead. My ideal weekend would be no phone at all and just talking to my wife because she has a bunch of things. She's just as interesting as any Instagram scrolling I do. My life is more interesting than Instagram. Usually. Yeah, Daisy, there's so much to listen to. Yeah, it's a bit too crazy. Not allowed to see all my secrets. Yeah, right? Like having somebody have access all the time. Be too much, man. Yeah, he was great. My mental health journey. Yeah, same. He definitely helped me there. And plus, I got into this whole thing, and I'm still in it, where I just like to hear people talk about positive things, personal development things, esoteric things. I just like to be exposed to those ideas. Ever since I started learning about the subconscious and superconscious, I started realizing, hearing those ideas really do help. And it's kind of like a glass of water that's just like filled with, mud, right? It's all like dark and brown. And I feel like the human body, the human mind, the subconscious is kind of like that too. And if you just start pouring in clear, good water, and you just keep on pouring it, eventually that glass that's filled with mud, it gets a little lighter, it gets a little lighter, it gets a little lighter. And then before you know it, you have a clean glass of water there, and that's what he did for me and does for me still. I got to get back to it.